Hello everyone and welcome to this lecture. My name is Burhanuddin and in this lecture we are going to learn that how we can save and restore our information in Android app. So now let's just open the Android Studio and start a new project. Let's just click on start a new project, select the empty activity and click on next. I will name it as save and restore. Okay, now click on the finish button and let's just wait until the Gradle are built successfully. Okay, so my project is ready now. So let's just design the layout of our application first. Okay, so now let's just go to the activity main. Let's just hide this thing. Okay, now let's just switch to the split view in order to remove this constraint layout and replace it with linear layout and remove this text view. Okay, so now let's just switch to the split view in order to preview the changes. Okay, so let's just change this constraint layout to linear layout. Okay, now let's just remove the text view. Now as we know that by default the orientation of the linear layout is horizontal, so let's just change it to vertical. Okay, so I'll type orientation and then I'll change it to vertical. Now I want the background of this linear layout to be as same as the background of my action bar, so I will set it to color primary. So I will type background and then to color primary. Now I want the UI elements inside this linear layout to be centered horizontally and vertically. So for that I will say that gravity to be centered, and this will set the layout elements and this will set the UI elements at the center horizontal, and this will set the UI elements to be centered horizontally and vertically as well. Okay, so now let's just add the other elements as well. Okay, so first of all I need a text view, so I will say text view with the layout width of mesh parent and layout height of wrap content. Okay, now let's just add some text to it in order to preview the changes, that how will it look. Okay, so I will say text only. Okay, now let's just add some style to it. So I'll say text style to be bold, and let's just increase the size of the text a little bit. So I'll say text size to be 25 sp. Then let's just change the color of this. So I'll say text color to be white. Okay, let's just name it as FFF, and then let's center this text inside the text view as well. So for that I will also type gravity to be center. Okay, so now what I want, let's just remove this text. Okay, now we don't want this text, and let's just give this text view an ID. Okay, so I will call it as main text. Okay, now let's just close this text, and now I want a button below the text, below this text view, so I'll say button. Okay, now let's just give this button a width of match parent and the height of wrap content. Okay, now let's just put some text on this button, so I'll say text and I'll write click me. Why not? Okay, now let's just add some style to this button, so I will say background to be white. Okay, and then I'll say text color be same as my color primary, and let's make it a little bit bold. So I'll say text style to be bold and the text size to be 25 sp. Okay, so now let's also add some margin to this button. So I'll say margin from left, right, top, bottom, everywhere. Okay, so I'll say layout margin to be 18 dp. Yeah, that's look good. Okay, so now let's just give this button an id and we are done with this XML file. Okay, so now let's just specify id, and I will give this button an id of click me btn. No, let's just give it click me. That's fine. Now let's just close this tag, and now let's just move on to the Java file. Okay, here is my text view and here is my button. Okay, so let's just move on to the Java file. Now here, first of all, let's just initiate this UI elements. So I'll say private text view. Let's just name it as main text, and then private button. Okay, and then let's just name it as, okay, so let's just import the class for this. So click on this, Alt enter, import classes. So it is all automatically imported for me. And now let's just name this button as click me. Okay, now let's just instantiate this reference variables. So I'll say main text equals to, this will be of type text view, of course, text view, and then I'll say find view by so I will say r.id dot the name of my text view was main text also. Okay, that's fine. So there is the reason that why I give the name in the XML file and the Java file same. Okay, so that it is easy to remember. Okay, so now let's just initiate the button as well. So I'll say click me, then it will be of type button, and then find view by id, it will be r.id dot click me. Okay, so let's just put the semicolon at the end, and now we are good to go. Now what I mean to say by save and restore, I will show you in a minute. Okay, so for that, let's just I need a string variable here, so let's just take it first. So I'll say string. I will not make it private or public anything, just type string, and let's just name it as my text. It will be fine. Okay, so my text. Okay, so now let's just click an anonymous listener for this button. So I will say click me dot set on click listener, and then I will say new on click listener. Now what I want that whenever user click on this button, the text view initially the text view is empty. Okay, so what I want that whenever user click on this button, the text view should show some text to the user, and that text will be stored in a predefined manner inside the string variable my text. Okay, so for that, let's just type my text, and then I will say my text contains the value hey, I'm here. Okay, let's just put a semicolon at the end. And now what I want that I need to set this text. Okay, so for that I'll say main text dot set text. Okay, and I want this text to be set as my text. Okay, so now let's just run our application and see what is happening here. Okay, let's just select my device, and now let's just run our application. Okay, so my application is up and running right now. So let's just click on this click me button, and now as you can see, as I clicked on this button, it showed me, hey, I am here. So this is completely working fine. Okay, up till now there is no problem in it. But what if I try to rotate the screen of this device? Okay, because usually in phones the auto rotation feature is available. Okay, and the people uses auto rotation feature usually with the applications. So we must make sure that my application looks the same whenever the user tries to rotate it in a vertical or horizontal manner. Okay, so let's just rotate our phone to this right and see what happens. Okay, so now as you can see, when I try to rotate my phone, the application works, the application which was working completely fine, but suddenly the text which was visible on the text view is disappeared. So why is it so? So this means that if the user turns or if the user changes the rotation of my device, I need to again click on this button in order to see this text. Okay, so now let's just try by turning the device back to the portrait mode. Okay, oops, this is the portrait mode, and now as you can see, the text is disappeared again. So this means that whenever the device is turned from the portrait mode to the vertical mode or to the landscape mode, the values which are stored in my UI components are getting disappeared. But actually the values of the UI component are not getting disappeared. The values inside my string variable and inside this function is getting disappeared. So why is it so? Now, to understand this, we need to understand our Android application's life cycle again. Okay, so first we have already studied that what is Android life cycle and how does it work, but there is something more that we must need to know in order to build a perfect application. Okay, so let's just develop that thing again here. Okay, so the first method which gets executed whenever the Android application is launched is the onCreate method. So as we have done in the previous example, we will do the same thing. We'll put the messages in the logcat. The reason now you can say that, hey, we can come on, we don't need to put them in the logcat. We can also do it in a toast message, right? So yeah, of course we can do that, but the reason that I'm using the logcat is if we try it in a to do it in a toast message, what will happen that after onCreate, the onStart method and the onResume method execute so quickly that we will not able to see that toast message, because that toast message will be behind on the behind the toast message of the onCreate method. Okay, the reason is when up until the toast message of the onCreate method will get closed, the toast message of the onStart method and onResume method will have been already started and already finished. Okay, because these all three methods basically start at the same time. Okay, so instead of showing the toast message, I am using the logcats because it works completely fine. Okay, so now let's just make sure you are on the onCreate inside the onCreate method, and let's just put it on the top. I will say log.i to putting this thing inside the information panel. Okay, so now let's just press the enter key, and as you know, this method takes 2 parameters as an argument. Okay, and the first one is the tag. Okay, so what is tag? It is basically used to uniquely identify our message. Okay, and the one thing that I told you to remember is always write your tags in the all caps mode. Okay, so just turn on your caps lock and write whatever you want. Okay, so for this just type my tags as we have done before, and now for the message I will pass on create method call. Okay, so now let's just run our application and check whether the logs are working or not. Okay, so now let's just run our application and open the logcat. Now let's just change the filter from verbose to information, and now let's just put our tag here, and now as you can see, it is showing me the message that onCreate method was called. Okay, so now let's just make it for other methods as well, but let's do one thing. Instead of creating this same thing or writing the same code again and again, which is a crime in terms of the programming language, that when you are programming you cannot write same code again and again. Redundancy is a crime. Remember that. Okay, so instead of writing this single line of code again and again, what we can do is we can create a function, and then whenever needed we need that line of code, we can simply call that function. Okay, so for that let's just create a function outside this onCreate activity. Okay, so here it is ending, so let's just close it. Okay, so outside of this onCreate activity, let's just create a function. Okay, so I will say it public and void, because this function is not going to return anything. Okay, so that's why I'm putting void keyword on that, and then I will name the function as mylogs. Okay, now I want to give this function one parameter. Okay, so why need I parameter? Okay, why need I put to why did I need to put a parameter right there? The reason for that is let's just suppose that if I want to use this function for the onCreate method. Okay, so for the message I need to pass something. Okay, so suppose if I create this function with the message of onCreate method called. Okay, so now if I want to use the same function on the onStart method, it will automatically say onCreate function was called, but actually the onStart method was called. Okay, so it is saying me onCreate method was called. So that is why I want to pass a parameter here, so that I can put whatever I can pass the value according to the function. Okay, and according to its usage. So the value is of course going to be a string type, because I need to pass the string value in my tags. Okay, so in my logs, so let's just type string and take a name of a variable, anything you want. So I will name it as let's just take it as message. Okay, and now let's just put some opening and one opening and closing braces on it, and then we can write our function here. So let's just cut this function from here, and now let's just put it here. Okay, and now let's just change this message to message. That is, we are referring this variable to be as our message. Okay, so now I want to use this function as my main function. Okay, so now let's just use this function in every other methods that we are going to implement. Okay, so now let's just cut this function from here and put it on the top, so that we can see it easily. Okay, so I'll make some space for this function here, and now I'll simply paste it here. Okay, so now let's just go on create method, give it some indentation, and now let's just let's just call our function. Okay, so I'll type log. okay, my logs it is. So I'll say my logs. As you can see, the autocomplete feature of Android is already suggesting me that do you want to use this function, and yeah, I want to use that function. So I'll click on the enter key, and now as you can see, I need to pass a string message, that is any message of string type. Now for the string value, as I am on the onCreate method, now I can pass that thing here, that onCreate method was called or is called. Okay, so now this thing should work completely fine as it was working before as log. So now let's just run our application and see whether it is working or not. Okay, so let's just open our application, and now let's just open our logcat. And now as you can see, it is saying onCreate method is called. Okay, so now let's just put other the lifecycle methods in it and apply the same function on them also. Okay, so after onCreate method, the next method that gets called is onStart method. So I'll say onStart, and now I'll say my logs, and as a string value I will say onStart method is called. Okay, so now let's just put other method as well. So after the onStart method, the next method that gets called is onResume method. So I will say onResume, then let's just call this function. So I'll say my logs, and then I'll say onResume method is called. Okay, so after the onResume method, the next method that gets called is onPause. Okay, that is when we press the back button or home button of the mobile. Okay, so onPause, and I'll call the same function on this. So I will say my logs, and then I will say onPause method is called. Okay, so now after the onPause method, the next method that gets called will be onStop. So I'll say onStop. We might have not put the onStop method in the earlier tutorial, but this is an important method also. So let's just see how does it work in the Android lifecycle. So I'll say my logs, and then onStop method is called, and the last method which gets called is after the application gets destroyed is onDestroy method. Okay, so I'll say onDestroy, and then I'll call the function in here. So I'll say my logs, and for the string value I'll say onDestroy method is called. onDestroy method is called. Okay, so now let's just run our application and see how whether it is working or not. Okay, so let's just run our application and open the logcat, and now as you can see, it says onCreate method is called, onStart method is called, and onResume method is called. Now we know that if I press the back button, then onPause method will be called, and then onDestroy method will be called. But now you can see that between those two methods there is one more method that gets called in the Android lifecycle is onStop method. Okay, so that was a new thing that we've learned in this lecture. Okay, so now there are two more methods that are very useful, but let's just open this app again, and now let's just delete this log values so that we can clearly see new values. So let's just close it again, delete these values again, and now let's just open the application again. And now as you can see, onCreate method is called, onStart method is called, and then onResume method is called. Now I want to click on this button in order to get the text inside the text view. Now let's just rotate this device and see which method is getting called. Okay, so let's just rotate this device, and now as you can see, after the onResume method, onPause method was called, onStop method was called, and after that onDestroyed method was called, and then again onCreate method is called, onStart method is called, and onResume method is called. This means that whenever I switch the device orientation from landscape to portrait or portrait to the landscape, the application is getting destroyed. Okay, so that was the reason why my text view became empty. Okay, so now it is clear that if I want to fill up the if I want to keep the text views value to be filled up, I need to store this value somewhere inside my Android phone. Okay, that is my application memory. Okay, so I need to store that value somewhere. Okay, so now we know the problem, and now we know that what we need to do. So now let's just take a look at how we can do that. So there are two more methods inside the Android activity lifecycle. They are very useful in order to store and restore the data. Okay, so that two methods are onSaveInstanceState and onRestoreInstanceState. Okay, so now this name on saved instance state might seem familiar to you, and that is because when we were on understanding the onCreate method, we saw that there is a variable name of saved instance state, or which is of bundle type, and then which we are using of course on referring the onCreate method of the super class also, and we are passing that save instance state variable. So basically we are going to use these two methods, and they are, let me type it out. So they are on saved instance states. Okay, so now as you can see, this method comes from activity app compact activity. Okay, so as you can see now, this method has certain parameters. The one is of out state, of which is of bundles type, and the other one is of out persistent state, which is of persistent bundle type. Okay, so now for now let's just don't worry about this, what is bundle and what is persistent bundle. Let's just focus on our aim, that is how to store and retrieve the data. So first let's just check that where in the Android activity lifecycle does these methods gets called. Okay, so for that let's just call our function that we have created, that is mylogs, and now I'll pass that on save instance state. I will say method is called. Okay, so this was the method which will help us to save the data. But now let's talk about the method which will help us to restore the data from this saved location. Okay, so for that method is on restore instance state. Okay, so now as you can see, this method has only one parameter, and which is same as the parameter which we have on the onCreate method. Okay, so now I will say let's just also see that where does this method get called in our Android activity lifecycle. So I will say mylogs, and I will give it a string value of on restore instance state method is called. Okay, so now let's just run our application and see where does these two methods are getting called and used in our Android activity life cycle. Okay, so I will just reinstall the application, and now as my application is installed, now let's just open the application, and now let's just open the logcat in order to see what is happening here. Okay, so now as you can see, as I open the application, the three methods that gets called is onCreate method, on start method, and on resume method. So the reason which the reason that I was telling you that it is not easy to show these three methods using the toast message. So you can see that now that these three methods open at the same time. Okay, you can see that it's 6:42 a.m. and 36 seconds, and all of the three methods were getting called, and the only difference is in the milliseconds. As you can see, it was called on 295 milliseconds, it was called on 298 millisecond, and this was called on 301 millisecond, 301st millisecond. So that was the reason that we will not be able to see these three methods in the or using the toast message. Okay, so now let's just switch back to our application, and now let's just let me click on this click me button in order to get the value inside my text view. Now let me just rotate this application and see what is happening here. Okay, so now as you can see, the methods which were called is of onPause method is called, on stop method is called, on destroy method is called, and then again on start method is called, on create method is called, on start method is called, and then before on resume method, the method which is called is onRestoreInstanceState. Okay, so where is my onSaveInstanceState? Okay, so now let's just switch back to the portrait mode, and now as you can see that again this three method is called. So that this means if I click, okay, so let's just open the application again, and now as you can see this onRestore method gets called whenever the application changes its orientation. So we can use this method to store the or restore the data, or restore the saved data inside our saved instance state. Okay, so now let's just see that how we can do that. Okay, so simply all we need to do is, let's just type here, I will use the object of I will simply say this say on save I will simply say I will simply use the bundle object and say okay, I think there is a problem here on save instance state. We actually needed to use this method which is only one parameter. Okay, so let's just remove this method from here. Okay, we do not need that second parameter right now, so let's just use this one parameter method, and now we will use this bundle object which says out state. Now if I put the dot, you can see that these are all the methods that I can use with this object. Okay, so I'll simply say dot put string, as I want to put the string value, and now as you can see I can put the string array list, or I can put the string value, or I can put the string array, and I will use it using I can use the this method using the key value pair. Okay, so the two parameters will be the first one will be for the key which will refer to the value, and the second parameter will be the value itself. Okay, so let's just give and yeah, remember one thing, every time we need to write anything any name for the keys, always turn on your caps lock and write it in capital words. Okay, so let's just simply say string value here. Okay, string value. And now for the value of that we need to store is residing inside this string, okay, whose name is my text. So I will simply pass the string variable here and say my text. Now the value is stored inside the save instant method, but how can I use or how can I fetch this value back to my application? So for that I will say simply string value, or for that I will say then what was the name of my string value? It is my text. Okay, so I will simply say my text equals to saved instance state, that is the object of this parameter which is of bundle type, and then I will say dot get string. Okay, so now here I need to pass the key which I have set for this value. Okay, so I will simply copy this and paste it here and then put the semicolon at the end, and now let's just check that whether this thing is working or not. So I will reinstall our application, and now let's just see that what is happening. Okay, so now let's just click on this button. Okay, so it says hey, I am here. Now let's just change the orientation of this phone from the portrait mode to the landscape mode, and now as you can see there is something wrong and this method is still not working. As you can see, we have done a big mistake here, that we have fetched the value again, but we haven't set that value to the to that text view again. So what we will need to do is we will need to set that value to the text view. So I will simply say the main text dot set text to be my text. Okay, so now let's just try to run the application again and see whether it is working or not. Okay, so let's just turn it again. Okay, so click me, and now if I rotate this, as you can see that it is working completely fine, and now we have successfully stored and restored the value in our application. Okay, so this was it for this lecture. See you in the next lecture.